There is a sentence that has lasted for 100 years, but the victim is an entire river. For a full century, this entire great biological system was strangled by massive concrete blocks, causing 93% of life to disappear completely. But here is the most absurd part. Humans sacrificed an entire ecosystem from the Ice Age just to gain an amount of electricity so small that it was practically insignificant. When experts realized this mistake, they decided to carry out the most extreme option possible: remove all the dams to free the water. And yet, the moment the first drill bit touched the concrete, they realized they were facing another disaster. Behind those walls was a compressed mass of toxic mud that had accumulated for 100 years. If released the wrong way, it would wipe out every last hope of the river's recovery in only a few hours. Standing at the boundary between saving and completely destroying this river, scientists were forced to carry out the largest ecological strategy in history. What happened immediately afterward left the entire international scientific community stunned, and it was completely different from everything they had predicted. Biological data from surveys along the river reveals the true scale of the destruction that took place here. In less than 2 decades, most of the natural characteristics of this 53-kilometer river were completely erased from the ecological map. This disappearance was not simply the blocking of water flow, but the paralysis of a vital nutrient supply. For many years, this decline was largely overlooked because humans made the mistake of defining the biological role of this river incorrectly. Hiitolanjoki was not an ordinary waterway. Experts considered its lower section a giant spawning ground created by nature. While other rivers flowed gently into the open sea, the power of Hiitolanjoki lay in its vertical drop of 18 meters. The water crashing over granite steps created a habitat of maximum oxygen saturation. This system turned the flow into an ideal environment, sustaining inland, isolated Atlantic salmon, creatures carrying a unique Ice Age genetic code, programmed to adapt to the river conditions found only here. Sadly, this natural perfection was destroyed when large-scale industrialization arrived. In only a short period of industrial history, those primeval rocky slopes were blocked to make room for 3 giant hydroelectric dams. These massive reinforced concrete structures not only stopped the surface flow, but also compressed the riverbed into stagnant mud reservoirs with no circulation. The entire perfect habitat was fragmented and completely isolated into sealed zones. When the native migration route disappeared, a chain of negative consequences began. Fish could no longer find oxygen-rich gravel beds for spawning because dense sediment blocked them, leading to a rapid population decline. The ecological chain of the entire region stood on the edge of permanent rupture. The pressure became so severe that later generations were forced to intervene quickly with artificial technological systems. And those rushed correction efforts unintentionally pushed the ecosystem into a far more dangerous condition. The ecological consequences began escalating and became clearly visible in real-world data. Biological surveys showed that migratory freshwater fish populations in this area had declined by as much as 93%. Changes in river flow increased water temperature, while dissolved oxygen levels dropped severely. A layer of fine sediment covered the riverbed, wiping out the habitat of invertebrate species. And it did not stop there. This rupture also created a terrifying domino effect. Freshwater pearl mussels, creatures that function like natural biological water filters and can live up to 200 years, began to decline on a massive scale. The reproductive cycle of the pearl mussel depends entirely on salmon. Their larvae must attach to the gills of migrating salmon in order to develop for several months before dropping to the riverbed. Without salmon crossing the dams, pearl mussels lose their host. Older mussels continue to survive weakly in the mud below, but no new generation is born. One essential ecosystem species is quietly moving toward extinction. In response to the recommendations of conservationists, the first generation of ecological managers tried to intervene with measures that were never truly complete. They required power companies to install fish ladders, artificial bypass routes meant to help fish swim upstream past the dams. These designs cost millions of dollars and were expected to resolve the conflict between energy production and nature conservation. However, reality proved this to be a clear failure. Data from hydrology studies across Europe showed that even the most modern fish ladder systems allowed fewer than 5% of individuals to pass successfully. For a fish species that must move repeatedly between lake and river throughout its life, 5% is not salvation, it is the prolonging of extinction. Meanwhile, the amount of electricity these three plants contributed to Finland's national grid was so tiny that it was treated as a negligible figure. We were trading the life of an entire ecosystem for a very small amount of electricity. If you were the one making the decision, would you keep spending money to preserve useless concrete, or remove everything to save the river? Leave your opinion in the comments below, because this question sparked fierce debate for many years. The failure of the fish ladder solution pushed experts into a dead end. They realized that temporary support measures could not restore a natural system that had already been fragmented. Scientists stood before a strategic decision: continue maintaining the river in a weakened state, or remove the barriers completely and rebuild the ecosystem from its foundation. And they chose the most radical option. Instead of continuing ineffective patchwork methods, a special action group was formed. The Worldwide Fund for Nature, the Finnish Ministry of Agriculture, and many private organizations mobilized major financial resources to acquire all three hydroelectric plants on the Hiitolanjoki River. Their objective was very clear: not to produce electricity or build more fish ladders, but to dismantle these structures completely and return the riverbed to the river. The breakthrough scientific discovery here was the concept of total barrier removal. However, on the engineering plans, this was a task carrying extremely high ecological risk. Dam removal is not as simple as placing explosives and clearing away concrete. A silent but dangerous threat was hidden there: the mass of fine sediment that had been trapped behind the dams for 100 years. The reason is that this block of sludge contains a great deal of organic waste and is completely lacking in dissolved oxygen. If the dams were destroyed too quickly, that entire volume of toxic mud would be driven forcefully downstream by the current. The mud layer would bury the spawning gravel beds, deplete oxygen in the water, and kill the remaining aquatic life. One mistake in the removal process could cause water quality here to collapse into severe pollution beyond recovery. To prevent the risk of contamination, the dam removal process was calculated with extreme care by the experts. Water flow was gradually released through secondary channels in clearly defined stages in order to control the speed of sediment transport. This process gave the river enough time to clean itself, slowly dilute organic waste, and avoid any sudden change in water quality. The theory was perfectly calculated on paper, but when the first drill bits actually punched through the concrete, nature gave its own answer at a speed far beyond every scientific prediction. So what exactly happened at the worksite? The demolition process was planned into 3 clear time stages over 3 years. Starting from downstream, the Kangaskoski Dam was the first structure to be removed. Excavators carefully lifted away each block of concrete to ensure that mud and sediment could escape safely. In the second year, the Launasenkoski Dam was also leveled. Finally, in the third year of the project, the tallest structure, the Riitakoski Dam, was completely dismantled to restore continuity to the river. But the most shocking part was not the destruction of infrastructure, it was the phenomenon of the river's self-recovery capacity. At first, engineers feared that after 100 years of being flattened beneath reservoir water, the riverbed structure had been completely deformed and would require artificial intervention to reshape the rocky spawning grounds. However, they were wrong. Only a few days after the barriers were gone, the river regained its original flow velocity. The strong current automatically swept away the layer of surface sludge and exposed the natural rocky foundation that had been buried for a century. The motion of the water acted like a physical machine. It sorted gravel and stone by itself, created deep pools for large fish to hide in, and at the same time formed shallow gravel beds that optimized dissolved oxygen levels for spawning fish. This complex riverbed system re-established a stable state in only a few short weeks, completely surpassing the many decades that computer models had predicted. The river operated by itself under the physical laws of water without any mechanical intervention from humans. And even before the residue from the demolition blasts at Lanus and Koski in the middle phase of the campaign had fully dispersed, amid the chaotic construction site filled with the noise of excavators and cranes, the biological survey team recorded a phenomenon that left even the most seasoned researchers stunned. The rocks that had just been exposed immediately became the center of attention, opening an entirely new chapter in the recovery of the food chain. A recovery happened so fast that no one dared believe it was real. The recovery was not measured in years, but in days. While temporary dam removal work was still underway, the monitoring teams detected salmon already surging through the construction site to move upstream. They did not wait for the project to be completed. Their survival instinct was so intense that they crossed the turbid water the moment the first gaps appeared in the barriers. Only a few weeks after the blast, the first egg nests appeared densely across the newly exposed gravel beds. As a result, only a few spawning seasons after the river was fully free again, the figures collected from field surveys astonished the academic world. The density of wild juveniles exploded to 200 to 400 individuals per 100 square meters in the rocky riffle sections. One leading expert stated that this was the highest density ever recorded in the history of river flow research in that country, exceeding even the natural streams long famous for their productivity. Ecologists predict that the number of migrating salmon each year will quickly reach 11,000 because of this rate of reproduction. That figure will double the total fish population of the entire river basin area. A freshwater species that once faced the risk of disappearing has now created a strongly growing population right where oxygen-poor reservoirs once existed. The increase in salmon numbers also plays a central role in supplying nutrients to the entire surrounding environment. Salmon absorb many essential nutrients, including nitrogen and phosphorus, from deep water bodies. After spawning and dying naturally upstream, their bodies decompose and become a direct source of organic fertilizer for the growth of riverside vegetation. At the same time, insect species that can survive only in clean water also increase significantly in number. The return of salmon allows the larvae of the freshwater pearl mussel to attach to fish gills in order to survive and develop. The cyclical food chain has officially begun operating again after being interrupted for a century, turning this area into one of the most successful freshwater ecological restoration projects. And yet, when this area's map is placed within the river systems of the entire continent, people are stunned to realize that this brilliant victory is actually only a small bright spot in an extremely serious ecological challenge unfolding every day. A problem far larger than we imagine. Analyzing hydrological data beyond Finland, the state of the continent's rivers is at a deeply alarming level. According to statistical data, Europe has about 1.2 million artificial concrete structures blocking river flow. On average, less than 1 kilometer of river length passes before another barrier appears. Most notably, most of these structures are already too old, no longer contribute to electricity production, and have no value in regulating water. They stand there like relics of the old industrial age, quietly isolating native fish species and driving migratory aquatic populations into steep decline across the globe. Even so, within that dark picture, the dam removal event on the Hiitolanjoki River created a powerful shock that changed policy thinking. Its extremely rapid recovery results had a major impact on the old way of thinking about environmental protection, forcing policymakers to reconsider strategy. Recently, a legal framework for large-scale environmental restoration was submitted, with a specific goal: remove artificial barriers and reconnect at least 25,000 kilometers of rivers before this decade ends. Many surrounding countries have adopted this solution and begun planning the removal of unused dams within their own management areas. From this remarkable success, the story leaves behind an ecological lesson that feels like a fundamental truth. Natural ecosystems possess a healing power far beyond even the most advanced human restoration technology. Nature does not need us to rebuild its systems for it. It only needs humans to step back, give up excessive interference, and return the living space that once belonged to it. Millions of concrete structures are still blocking rivers across the world, obstructing the natural restorative power of flowing water. Are we ready to remove these aging infrastructures in order to restore the planet's most important biological system? In the next video, we will explore remarkable stories of environmental restoration projects where nature delivered results that shocked the scientific world. Press subscribe so you do not miss these important insights into natural ecosystems.